So this morning we're going to be talking about employee deductions and what happens when an employee is overpaid. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So what actually happens in this instance? Are businesses entitled to the money back from employees?
You would think so, because I guess in any other situation you overpay a friend, you can ask them for a refund. But it's not as straightforward, and generally the general rule is it falls under a deduction, so where you deduct amounts from an employee's wage.
Yeah.
So you really first need it in writing from the employee.
Right.
And if they don't agree to that, then you're kind of stuck.
Yeah.
So it's something I come across quite a bit, or in some form or another, where someone's been overpaid and they discover it. If the employee discovers it, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But if the employer discovers it, it's normally a bit of time after.
Yeah.
So the main event is like changing rates, for example, or using new software, and you're just trying to confirm the rates. Yeah. And then you go, gosh, we've overpaid. So it has to be in writing, and it's principally for the benefit of, the employee.
Yeah.
And that's hard to prove, and it has to be also allowed, by a court order or by Fair Work. So it has to be also allowed by the employee's award or a registered agreement.
Right. Okay.
So that whole registered agreement stuff is now going into more legal, but just want to talk about the practical sides as to how it happens. Most people go, well, how does it happen? And, it's really hard. Payroll is very confusing, and especially when you're onboarding new employees. Yeah. And if you don't have the right software to guide you through, you don't realize you have a problem until someone points it out. And it's much of a way later. Yeah. And asking people to repay it. Getting someone who is in the HR industry is important, because they can then tell you what kind of agreements you should have, what kind of, agreements you and the employee should sign. Yeah. It's so important to get that right. You probably need an employee. It could be a friend even. And you go, come and do a few hours with me, and that's what happens. Yeah. And the simple things get lost. One in particular I see is workers' comp. Yeah. And that's awful, especially if someone gets injured and you don't have it. Wow. Yeah. And it's ridiculous how many people don't know you need it. But it's not like it's public knowledge as such. That workers' comp is actually an insurance you must have. And you must organize it pretty much just before, even for yourself. You just never know. Just have it. Yeah. And how? How does it happen? Yeah. Clerical errors always happen. So I gave an example of changing like employee wages, for example. Right. Another way it happens is, if you're hard keying figures into your bank account. Sure. And you get the 6 and you turn it into a 9. Yes. Wow. And then you set up a recurring payment of that amount. Yeah. Because you're like, they're full-time and that's how much we're paying them. Yeah. So it's those situations as well. Yeah. Okay. And so what does it's the Fair Work legislation, isn't it? What does that say? The Fair Work does say it has to be in writing. So that's really the first step. And also then it has to be allowed by Fair Work, and then also under a registered agreement. So those two, the last two, court order or a registered agreement, really you need legal advice at that stage. So that's hard. At that point, it's already contentious in a way. Yeah. You have an employee as well. So there's also employee relations. Yeah. I guess, how will you feel continuing working together? Exactly. Knowing that this issue has happened. And there have been cases where the employee turns around and says, not my problem, rightfully so. Not their problem, but there's a relationship there. And straight away, you still will need advice on how to keep the work culture going, especially if they're senior in their position and this has happened. That can flow through to the juniors. So that's what Fair Work says. In WA, we also have Wage Line. Right. And Wage Line follows the same principles. So I've mentioned Fair Work because everyone knows about Fair Work. Fair Work applies mainly to companies. So if you're registered as a PTY LTD, which is most small businesses, and Wage Line is great to call as well if you are not a company, so like a sole trader, a trust, or a partnership, then you call Wage Line to discuss this matter, especially if you don't know. And it's always good just before, even if you're talking redundancy, paying out leave, or if an employee asks you a really weird question and your accountant isn't available, then call those two just to make sure there's nothing wrong with confirming. And it's also prudent to confirm rates. Yeah. I would say yearly, just to make sure that you know that's happening, because there's no way of knowing that the rates have changed. Yeah.
Wow, exactly. It's a lot to consider, a lot of dynamics. Does it happen a lot, do you think, employees being overpaid?
It happens a lot.
Yeah, right.
It happens more often than you think. Sometimes the amounts are really small. Other times it's found out by myself, like when I'm doing the returns and then the employee's gone. And that's even worse. So, there's others where it happens, where I'm on the other end. I see clients who are employees and they're telling me that they've got $4,000 to pay back. And then I realize, well, it wasn't written. It was just expected. So some do it good for the goose, It's like, it's good for the goose. Yeah. And that's an awesome place to be, but things should always be in writing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess mistakes happen, and I guess sometimes the best way to fix things is just to start by talking about it, isn't it? Rather than let it just sort of fester away and...
Yeah, actually, yes, that's right. So I think
bring it up.
That would be Naomi, that's a good one. Bring it up.
Yeah.
Don't make this expectation that it has to be done. Otherwise, then you put people on the back foot.
Yeah.
And then they get their backs up and then they start to defend themselves as they would. So have it done. Even if the employee is not amenable, it still would be good to write something to explain why it's happened.
Yeah.
And, when it happened and how you found out. So creating a story, it needs to be documented in case other things need to be done.
Yeah.
As to, have you spoken to them? And if you say no,
yes,
you have no leg to stand on.
Yes, this is true. Any other practical tips that you can offer our listeners, Kat?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing is call WageLine.
Yeah.
Just have a general chat of how you're set up and ask if you've got it right. If you do not have workers' comp insurance, I suggest you have it. I don't know how many people are there, but as long as you have someone working there, it's always prudent to have workers' comp insurance. The other thing outside of this is around the time workers' comp needs to be paid, is just check that your industry code is right.
Right. Okay.
Some people don't have their industry code correct.
Yeah.
And another tip is create a new employee pack. And the new employee pack should have all their details correct in there. Sometimes the mistakes happen because you're having to constantly go back to their record to update it. And always call Fair Work to ask for the rate that is applicable to them, because that's another issue that could come up as well. And get it looked at by a bookkeeper. So you might not need one 24/7, but having one on site to just come in quarterly is perfect for you, because then you avoid these type of mistakes, because they will even happen at a bookkeeping level, but at least you don't want it happening to 10 employees. That's a hard conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Kat, thank you so much for chatting with us.
You're welcome.
For our new segment, Taking Care of Business, here on the MAG.
Yeah.
And we'll look forward to chatting with you next Monday.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it.
See what's in store.